This is another episode of Design Your Dream Home with Doug and Steve. And now the architects, Doug Pat and Stephen Chung.
You are watching or listening to the Design Your Dream Home podcast with Doug and Steve. I'm Steve. That is Doug. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Stephen. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic.
So we've got a guest today, somebody that I enjoy working with. Her name is Diana Byrne. Diana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. So let me tell our guests a little bit about Diana. Diana is an interior designer. She's also a friend. She and I met back maybe at the end of 2013 or beginning of 2014. Is that about right, Diana?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. So we worked on a home renovation project in Rye, New York. It was a contemporary addition to a traditional English Tudor, and it was done through Job Moore's office in Greenwich. Our viewers can find that on online at the Wall Street Journal or Dwell magazine. And we just started working on another project together in Riverside, Connecticut at the end of 2016, and that project is currently finishing up. We have had an amazing client. I mean, it's probably one of the best people that I've ever worked with, and Diane's done an amazing job. So that has been a lot of fun. Just quickly about Diana's work. So she is a very talented interior designer, and I trust her judgment a great deal. One of the most unusual things about Diana is that she really could have been an architect. And what's kind of funny about that is most people, say, well, I wish I had studied architecture. And some people even say, I could have been an architect. But in this case, it actually is true with Diana. So she has a great sense of space. She's very creative. And this is not demeaning when I say this, but she grasps architectural concepts very quickly. And in fact, she comes up with very good solutions many times in front of the client before I do, which is wonderful for me because it makes me look so good in front of the client. So anyway, what's interesting about Diana is she has a kind of a complex background. Now, do I understand this right? You worked for a record label kind of early on in your career?
Yeah.
Now, who was that? What was that?
Back when I was fun. I worked at this label called N2K. It was a startup, and I worked in the A&R division.
Okay.
And our job was to go out and scout talent, new bands.
Yeah, that is so cool.
I into music, just personally, and all different kinds of music. And so it was a little bit random, but it also kind of just felt right. So we would go out in New York City, at all hours and go to these hole-in-the-wall bars like CBGB's and where all the new bands were playing and look for the new and upcoming young bands and rock stars. It was fun.
So how long did you do that?
I did it for a couple years, and then I started to feel like long-term it may not be, I don't know. I just didn't think it would last because the hours were late. And just in terms of a lifestyle, it wasn't for me. And so that's when I went and worked at Vogue magazine, which was kind of another leap a little bit of a different path. But it all was, again, something I was interested in magazines and fashion, and I went for it.
So you worked for Vogue and Allure and 17 magazine, is that correct?
Yes.
Wow. So you did that for a few years?
Yeah, so I started at Vogue. If anyone's seen The Devil Wears Prada, that was that was how it really was. It was it was fascinating. I worked with Anna Wintour. I had to interview with her, and I almost didn't know exactly what I was getting myself into, which I think was a blessing, or I think I would have been really intimidated. But it was great. I mean, in that world, it's very common to bounce around to kind of work your way up. So I started as an assistant at Vogue and getting coffees and running to photo shoots and just running around like a young crazy person. And then I ended up going to Allure and worked in the beauty department there. And then one of the editors from Bazaar started or relaunched YM, which was a big deal at the time. And she took me on as the beauty editor there, and then went back to went to 17 and then went back to Allure. So kind of just worked my way up there in the fashion industry. And it was fun because it was doing a lot like what I do now. It was every day was completely different.
Yeah.
Some days I would be on photo shoots. Some days I would be, writing blurbs for new skincare products. Some days I'd be covering the fashion shows and going backstage. And so it was exciting. It was fun. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about writing. And I think more importantly, though, about like laying things out on a page and space and color. And I think that all has always appealed to me. And I think fashion too. And just kind of reinventing things that I've done before. It all, looking back on it, kind of makes sense now, given what I do now.
Yeah.
It's all very visual and aesthetically drawn. And I guess I always just wanted to use the creative part of my brain. And so I ended up in these fields.
Yeah. So, and you founded your business in 2011. Is that correct? Your current business, DB Designs?
Yes. That's
okay.
About, I mean,
and
it was
you've got a business partner named Lynn Biasi. Is that correct?
Yes. When I first started, I had a business partner who's since moved to Florida, and she and I started it.
Okay.
And we just were both very drawn to the field. We had both renovated our own homes in different, in kind of different variations and versions. And we just kind of came to, I didn't really know her well before, but we just had something in common. And long story short, one of my best friends was building a beach house out in the Hamptons. And she knew that we were kind of thinking about starting a business. And she just took this total leap of faith and said that she wanted us to do it. And we did. And we dove in, and it was totally crazy. But it ended up being one of the best decisions ever, because it really it was definitely an educational experience.
Yeah.
And it just, I think, made me realize that this was something that came naturally to me and something that I could do. So that's kind of where it all began.
Wow. It sounds really, really cool. And then I probably met you a few years later at the project in Rye.
Yeah. So then, that partner moved, and I ended up partnering with my partner now, who does all the business, it's just really, as you guys know, is almost just another completely other job. I mean, it's a different part of the brain, and it's so utterly time consuming and so important though too. So my partner, Lynn Biasi, who used to work at hedge funds and has a very Excel spreadsheet in her mind at all times. Yes. She does all that for me, and she's wonderful, wonderful. I couldn't do it without her.
That's really cool. So you've got a profoundly kind of complex background, and yet you really know what you're doing when it comes to interior design stuff and design stuff. And you had said once to me you had thought about studying architecture, or you wished you had done it, or if you did it over again, you would do that. Would you really?
I don't know. I had taken, when I had my first baby, I had stopped working in the magazine business, but I was still kind of starved to do something creative. So I was living in New York City, and I took a few classes, and I enjoyed them. And I think for a while I thought, well, should I go back to school? And I didn't, and I don't know exactly why. I grew up in DC. My parents are doctors and lawyers, and I never had someone that I looked up to who was an architect or was an interior designer. So I don't even think I knew this world really. I knew it existed, but I didn't know a lot about it. And so even applying to colleges, I didn't think, oh, maybe this is something that I should look at, a school that has this field. Or part of me wishes that I had, but then at the same time, you can't change the past. And I do think this journey has taken me here, and it's great. Like, I'm happy where I am. Sometimes it's frustrating when I want to just build something and I can't quite get there because I don't know how the ceiling's going to stay up if I do this. There's certain things that clearly I could use, and that's when I call it Doug.
Well, no, I think that's really good. So it's actually a good segue into discussing what we had talked about before we got together, and that is, are there some things that have been on your mind lately about clients, about design your dream home, about what you're doing that you'd like to talk about today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things that go into. I mean, if someone came to me and said, I want to design my dream home, what should I do? I think there's so many different important factors. And I think one is, for me personally, is having a good team to work with. And like Doug, you had mentioned, our client that we're finishing up with right now is is a dream, but I also feel like our team is a dream. With working with you and the client and the contractor and the builders it changes everything. And as I'm sure you guys can testify to the same, having a client who's open-minded and has a level of trust in what I'm doing, in what you're doing, it creates this flow to a job, which I think is invaluable, versus if the relationships aren't there, if things are stop and go with timing, it impacts, I think, a job greatly. I think it makes the process harder. I think it makes the creative flow, it kind of stunts it a little bit. So I think having the team, including the client as part of the team, and having a level of trust there. I mean, I namely work on a word of mouth kind of basis. Like I would never work with someone that I felt like we didn't connect in a way, because it sounds kind of cliche, but I think it's very, very important. And then also just making a plan in terms of the timing and what the priorities are, and setting a budget. But I do feel like sometimes things start going and then they just go. And to me, that's an ideal, not in terms of budget, but in terms of people are happy with what you're doing, the job grows. And I think that's usually a good thing. In terms of specifics of a dream home, I think if someone's starting from scratch and building a new house is one thing, versus I think more often than not, for my clientele and my experiences, people are often they're either doing a huge renovation within the house that they're in, and that is very different because it's often trying to balance the architecture of the old initial house with things that they want to do, which I'm finding lately are often very different. So sometimes I wish we could always just start from scratch, but more often than not, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So,
Stephen?
Can I ask you a question? So just more fundamentally, because you're our first interior designer, can you define what that is and where that line between, let's say, architect and interior designer for you lies? Because I think people get confused sometimes. They think, oh, I guess if there's interior designer, that means architect does exterior design, I guess. So just how do you define it for yourself?
Honestly, I don't think there's an answer to that. And who knows, like Doug, I may have driven you crazy at times, like stepping over the lines. And there are times when I think it's a very clear division. Because I didn't go to school for specifically interior design. I mean, I took a few classes. I certainly didn't go to school for architecture. I don't know. I know that I can't tell you, I can't draw something and guarantee that we can take that pillar out and the wall's not going to come crumbling down. It's not going to have a storm come and break it apart. So I know where it's obvious. I think each job is different, though. There have been some projects that I worked on where, like out in the Hamptons on one beach house, for example, it was very clear walking into the space, like these walls need to come down. There was the ocean view was blocked, clearly knocked down the wall. There was too many beams. It was so busy. And to me, it was very obviously what we needed to do. We called a local architect. He drew it up and then he was out the door. However, I think, and you guys can speak to this better than I can, I think oftentimes the architecture firms have interior designers within their firm. And so then maybe they dictate where they stop and the interior designer takes over, as in, we're going to build everything. You give us the finishes and then you do all the furniture and the lighting and the carpets and all that. For me, I just, when I walk into a space, I don't think of it like, well, my job stops here and then I'm going to have the architect take over. Unless the architect calls me and says, can you come in and help me on the job? Then it's, you tell me what you want me to do and I'll offer wherever you want me. Mm-hmm. So it kind of also often depends on when I'm called in. Like sometimes people will call me when the drawings are done, we're starting building. Can you just run through and see if there's anything that you might think of that we've missed, another set of eyes, so that when you come in to decorate it, you don't say, oh, I wish we had, put the pantry over here because we could have. So for me, I don't have an answer for that because I think it's different on each job until it gets to the point of structural engineering, which I know nothing about. I feel like every meeting I have with Doug, I learn something new about, this side of the window is for this and this side is for that. And so I I get to learn working with amazing people, but there are certain things that I cannot do. And so that's obvious. But in terms of building furniture and cabinetry and windows and that type of thing, I love doing it.
So maybe there's a spectrum. It's sort of like architecture, which there's interior design, which is kind of, let's say, in the middle, and then to the far right or whatever is decoration. And interior design is where there's a lot of overlap, right? Because that could be, it could be the materials, it could be the casework, it could be shelving, lighting.
Yes.
Maybe it's something like that. There's in between. There's this overlap where, because certainly as an architect, I pick colors. I'll do lighting. I'll do principal pieces like furniture. I mean, I'll do that. But sometimes the owner will say, no, actually, I have this person I like, so I want you to create the frame, let's say, and then I want someone else to come in with a maybe not inconsistent, but just a different outlook or something like that. And so together, hopefully it works. But so there's that sometimes. Does that sort of make sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it's coming from my point of view. In a certain point, there is the circles where they overlap. There are some blurred lines for sure. And I think, again, if you go back to having a great team and you guys, I mean, I feel like, Doug, there was a few times we're riffing off each other and it just kept getting better and better and better. It's like we're all creative people and we're all in this field because there is some similarity of interests. Sometimes I'm looking at the math of like a molding and I'm like, oh, like that's why I don't want to go to architecture school. There's certain things that, shockingly, I wasn't a math genius. I don't know if that will surprise you, but I know architecture, I think there's a lot of math there that, but in terms of the creative part, I do think there's overlap for sure.
I think there is a level of collaboration which is different with every interior designer and architect. And that has definitely been one of the bigger differences on this project that I've experienced than with other projects where, sometimes an interior designer comes in and there's no collaboration whatsoever, and their role perhaps is more limited. In this most recent project, I'd say even more so than the job in Rye, we've been able to collaborate more. And I think that's been synergistic. It's been something that really just kind of worked out really well. And I'm certain that it doesn't always work out that well with some.
And I also think it's the same thing with clients. I mean, some clients, they're like, just go to town. Here's what I think I want. Go. And then I bring stuff to them and it's approved. And there are other clients who want to come into the city with me and go shopping and talk about it and touch it and feel it and bring it back and look in the house and then go back. So it's also, for me, every job is very, very different.
So something that occurs to me as you were talking about this project that we've been working on recently is this notion that there is really no budget. Or that the budget can be limited in some respects and isn't limited in others, or it depends on the client and project. And so what do you think about that? I mean, do you find, I know that you and I likely find that where we work, there's less of a budget with most clients, although sometimes there really is. Do you find it difficult to have a client who has a pretty constrained budget, or that doesn't bother you at all?
Is this such a question? No, I think, look, most people have a budget. Absolutely. And I respect that. And I often like the challenge of it because sometimes I feel like, oh, I have this dream in my head, but it costs $1 million. So figure it out. So I have to figure out a way and hunt. Sometimes there's more hunting involved or, maybe the thing that in my head I want custom built, like I have to find something similar and we can tweak it. And it's a challenge. It's sometimes it's ironically more time consuming.
Yes, it is.
Because you have to think harder. But again, I feel like
That's a good point.
On every job, I learn something new. So whether it's a less expensive way to provide lighting in a whole house, like I just did lighting for an entire house and I felt like we scored. Like we did it for really well. Everything was very well priced, and I was so happy with all the lighting. And I felt like and there was a level of satisfaction for me, and definitely for the client, because they weren't spending as much. That was different than, the world is your oyster and just go to town. I mean, then the other side of that is when the budget isn't limiting, I can look for things that are. I mean, it's you can build. If you dream it, they will build it, and
right.
It's really exciting. So everyone's different, and I think you have to work with what you have. And if there is a budget, we make it work. We make it work.
Since we're talking about budget, and actually, I'm sort of curious about fees. You don't have to answer specifically, but like these days, it seems that in the past we used to go to design centers and look at things, and of course, nobody really could tell the price. I mean, it was more kind of a quiet thing. And now with just so much more available information, I think a lot of the owners and clients that I've met, they're just much more knowledgeable about what things should cost, and they're less likely to say, we want you to handle that procurement and all of those things. How have you found it in your world? Have you had to kind of modify, or maybe, I don't know, how do you kind of arrange, let's say, contracts with clients?
Right. So basically, everything that we do, that Lynn and I do, is completely transparent. I mean, you go online, you can find the price of everything. But even before that, when we first started, I'm happy to share how we work. I mean, basically, any discount that I get is given directly to the client, and then I get a percentage on it. So there's no confusion. They see what it costs in the store. They see my discount, which can vary. And that way, and then when it's all every month, it's laid out. Here's what you bought. We will buy it with your credit card. You have your statement. Here's the commission. And here are the hourly fees. I think people often charge room fees versus hourly fees. Everyone's a little bit different, but in terms of price of goods, it's all completely transparent. And I have heard people complain about other designers saying, she charged me $500 for this desk, and I went online and it was at Pottery Barn for $250. So, right. I mean, that's just silly.
Right.
But it's tricky. It's like we're all working so hard, and this is a business. At the same time, if there's, sometimes people, if they're really strapped and they're having a hard time, like, we figure something out. It's like, I want them to be happy, and I want it to look amazing. And the money often isn't going to make or break that.
So the hourly is kind of the primary way that you work, let's say, right? It's not like a percentage of, let's say, interior design elements, or it's based mostly on the amount of time you spend on it, and plus some commission for pieces.
Yeah, the commission for building too. Like for if we're doing big renovations, normally I get a commission on that, which is also kind of standard. Yeah. Commission on anything purchased, and then hourly fee. The hourly fee actually isn't where I don't know. I think every job's a little bit different depending on how much renovations people are doing. It depends. Sometimes I feel like I should take a day or a weekend and sit down with my business partner and my husband, the businessman, and say, is this really, are we doing this? And my accountant, but who has time for that? Like, I don't know. I think it's efficient for the client because they see everything. I feel like I could probably be a little bit more savvy and be, but I don't have time for that.
It's so funny because this internal conflict you have, it's like Doug and I have this too. I mean, I have this all. Well, Doug was with somebody, but like for me, I'm the same way. I'm like, I really get excited about a project. I'm like, oh, I could charge more, and I don't know. I just don't. I'm fighting myself then. I'm like, I'm a businessman. I'm a creative person. I'd rather have this partner that you have that I can at least just say, you guys handle that part of it, because I don't really want to get involved with that. I just want to work on a really great project and just put all my energies into it and not think about, I should charge more or charge less or whatever. I hate all that.
Against what the creative part of it is like, it's free. It's beautiful. Just do it. So it is. It's a different, and that's not who I am either. So it's a lot of people I work with are my friends or siblings of my friends or good friends of friends, and that's probably the dumbest thing I could do, because then it's more awkward, and I just am like, I'm not gonna charge you, but let that be the biggest problem, right?
Isn't that funny, the word of mouth thing? It's like, because I know that person, but then that person, because you know them, expect that, hey, we can, right?
Darker days,
talk to my business partner.
On the darker days, it is like the slippery slope with that too is people are often like, I just have a quick question just for one room, like run in.
Tell me
and
about it.
and then that becomes like favors but it's all good. I mean, I have one of my doctor friends is always like seeing patients in the parking lot. So I think it just comes with the territory of.
All right, so Doug, I interrupted your 3 pieces of advice. So do you want to sort of get Diana back? I'm sorry, I took her off track there.
Number was I on?
No, not at all. Diana, do you have more stuff you want to talk about? I mean, is there a number 2, or was that all 3 just kind of thrown in there?
It's number 1, man. That's all you ever need. No, I mean,
What do you think?
There's so much to talk about in terms of, well, what is exciting to me right now is how the lines are blurring, like within a house, say. Everyone wants their kitchen to be basically have everything possible happen in their kitchen. They want it to be comfortable. They want it to be their dining room. They want it to have a powder room right off it. They want to entertain there. They want to store everything there. It's almost like if we can get the kitchen into something that makes everyone happy, then kind of that's where we start. But I also feel like other rooms are blurred. Like the living room is kind of now like another family room. So do we really need a living room? And the kitchen is kind of the dining room. And everyone, I feel like there's more mobility and like fluidity among rooms too, even with furniture. Like we don't have to have a sofa or end tables that stay necessarily where they are or be in a traditional setup. And I feel like that's exciting because there's a lot of more unexpected furniture being built and ways to lay out a room. There's kind of 2 things I'm saying here, I guess, a little bit. And that's exciting to me. I think people are really open to opening up walls in their main living space. And I don't mean in like a McMansion-y kind of way, like even in older houses, like breaking down walls, putting in new windows. I think that like bringing the exterior in more, the indoor outdoor is being blurred more. And no matter where you live, I feel like there's got to be an area of your house that you want to see more of, let more light in. And that's exciting to me. I mean, I feel like I don't even mean to, but that's often the first thing I see when I walk into a new home is where is the light coming from? The natural light coming from? Is there enough? Where are the windows? Because other than your bedrooms and your powder rooms, everyone wants more light, and we can always darken it if we need to at different times of the day. And I kind of just went on like a rambling.
That was great.
No, not at all. So what's always interesting to me is this, we're talking about blurred line between the kitchen and the family room, right? That wall is dissolving or has dissolved to the point where most houses that we go to, we're taking it out. Do you see us ever putting it back in again? I mean, I was reading, I think 6 months ago, that some architects are putting walls back up again in between these 2 spaces because clients, because this open concept idea has just gone bananas, and people are they want to turn back the clock on that.
I do see in terms of like a little more of a traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not anytime soon. A lot of my clients have kids, and I feel like that layout lends itself to the kids. And
it does, big time.
Stylistically, though, I do see there's beautiful screens, dividers, again, more mobile and more temporary, or furniture that can separate. There's always the half wall, but I see more like the back of the kitchen banquet, and maybe in a room that is fighting for more space. The back of the banquet is the front of it is another seat going into another room. I do see some more traditional styles emerging a little bit. But in terms of the layout, I don't want it to.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Again, I think there's certain cases where maybe that would make sense, but
yeah.
I think everything's been done before, and it's like fashion. It keeps getting
and
we put our own twist on it. So yeah, we'll see it, and then we'll see it go back. But
Yeah.
no, I think it's a user friendly layout. I think I don't know. I feel like mudrooms are getting bigger. I feel like the kitchen and the mudrooms are often leading into that family space. I feel like the kitchen too is, whether it's like for your pets or for your kids, like those, like or the bar space for the wine, or the filtered water for the kids, or the kombucha tea fridges. It's like there's 4 different fridges now for every person in the family. Like, again, it's just like this all encompassing room for everyone. And I don't know. I don't see that changing in terms of how it leads into the family room. I don't.
It's interesting. You and I talked a little bit about this. Architects, when we go to college, we're taught that creating timeless style, timeless architecture, timeless aesthetic is really, really important. It's something that we should be shooting for all the time. And I mentioned that to you, and you had said, Doug, I really see this more as style and changing. And what's interesting about our clients is they really do have the money most times to look at their interiors as though they are stylized and that they will change. Mm-hmm. And so talking to you about that was really the first time I had tried to put the two together in my mind. So you've got this you've got this notion that you're creating timeless architecture. At the same time, the interiors perhaps are not that way, but the exact opposite. And the other thing that's been really interesting about at least the last 3 or 4 jobs that I've worked on is we work in these traditional pieces of architecture, and yet we're adding lots of contemporary stuff and even stylistic elements to the interiors. So you've got this clash of styles, happening in a way I think that is never happened before, at least in my experience over the last 20, 25 years. Are you seeing that?
Definitely. And I think just to touch on a point I mentioned before, in terms of a lot of people are renovating houses that were built 20 or more years ago, and the styles have changed dramatically. So at one point, do you knock it down, or do you, I think a lot of people can't do that. So it's coming into a place and thinking about what you must keep and what's beautiful and timeless and classic, and then what you can change and not have it look and have it kind of blend and look natural and not contrived when it's all put back together. But that to me is I think that's challenging. And the job that we have recently been on, Doug, is very classic home. And I think we've been able to maintain so much of the more traditional woodwork. And I mean, there's dental moldings there, and then some crazy furniture and crazy lighting. And I think it works. I think it's interesting. I mean, I think
I agree.
Different. And it's a fine line, though, between interesting and really messed up.
Overkill. Yeah.
This term contrived is interesting, because I think like of a home, let's say that over time you've collected pieces, you don't really worry about trying to be so consistent. It's more like this is your life. That couch I got when I was there, and I did this and I did that. And it feels very authentic because that's how you've lived your life. Mm-hmm. And then let's say I see an athlete's house that obviously he hired a decorator and everything looks very contrived. It just looks like somebody else's place. But that person, that young athlete, doesn't know. He's like, okay, it all looks good. Right. But you look at it, you kind of think, that's not you really. So how do you as a designer try to, I guess, interpret or read into or understand who this person is and try to find ways to express this family or person? How do you do that?
Well, I think that's the most important part of my job, really, is to, when I meet someone or have known someone and start working for them, is to be able to sense and capture their style and what they like and get it out there, and respect the things that they love, that they're keeping, that mean a lot to them, whether it's an object, a piece of furniture, a piece of art, and work around that and make that shine. And so if we can't do that, then what's the point? I mean, I think, no, I mean, that's
great. I agree.
Well, sometimes I have a hard time even talking about it and describing it, but each of my clients has a very different aesthetic, and sometimes it's more dramatically different, but other times it's just nuanced and I think it takes a lot of conversation with them. I think it takes looking at pictures together or their art collection together or the stuff that they love and knowing even sometimes how they dress or the music or just, and that's sometimes why it's a benefit working with friends because I think I know what they're going to like. And I have to kind of get in their brain. And when I'm out shopping for them or kind of trying to dream up things for them, I have to be thinking the way they are. But I do think it's very important to maintain their, the feeling that it's their home.
Right.
And I can't stand it when you walk into a place and it feels like I went into one store and I said, this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I'm going to put up, the wallpaper I put in the last 6 houses and it will be beautiful, but it will be boring. And I think that's where the contrived comes in when people are just, banging out house after house and they all look the same and they have no soul and they have no like feeling and memories and they don't feel like anyone's ever lived there, even if they have lived there for 10 years. And so I think it's also mixing sometimes, even if I am starting fresh and they have nothing they want to save, maybe it's everything is new, some is custom, some is antique, and, throwing things off a little bit in that way, throwing off the balance of the artwork styles or throwing off maybe there's a 200-year-old chest in there that we found in Paris, and then everything else is crazy modern and new. And that, again, goes back to the balance of the architecture. And that's what I am drawn to, and that's what I love is having that balance and not having everything in a room feel like it's from the same place or the same decade even. One other thing I was going to mention too, when you guys were talking about, or did you have a question about that?
Well, no, I just wanted to make one comment. I thought that was a really good point. You said it's your house. I have one client that I think sometimes, I don't know if they're intimidated, but I think it's a she. I think she feels like I'll just trust you. And I ask questions trying to get them to make it more their house. Because I can make a very consistent frame, but I kind of feel like it needs to come alive, it needs to be your house. So she asks questions like, do you think it would be okay if I had a barn door here? I said, it's your house. Let's do it. I mean, you want the wall to move? Let's do it. I mean, you don't have to, I'm there to work with you. I mean, I guess I could just do what I do and not with you. And maybe you move into this thing that's my house, I guess.
Your house, yeah.
But probably it would be more interesting if it's really, we get to know each other and I try to do the best I can, but at the same time, you're a unique, complex person, and it would be nice if we could figure out a way that this thing became actually very unique just because it's two people. It's not, or whatever, a team, and not just my vision. And the thing is, by the way, a lot of architects, as you probably know, it has to be their vision, right? And it's difficult. And maybe some interior designers are like that too. It's like, you hired me, step away. I'm Philippe Stark. I'm doing this, and you want me. That's what I'm going to give you.
Fun. I mean, that doesn't even sound, I'm sure to do one like that would be like, close your eyes. And when I'm done, you can come home.
Right.
I worked on a house. It was a beach house where it was 3 sisters, and they didn't let the husband, they shared it as their second home. They didn't let the husband see it until they were done. Cause they were like, there's just too many cooks in the kitchen here. The girls are going to run the show here with me. And the guys didn't see it until the very end. But yeah, I mean, it was just funny. It was like a reveal. But I think that goes, what you said kind of goes back to the idea of having the relationship with your client too, so that it's an open dialogue. And if they see something they love, share it. And it's inspiring. I'm inspired by my clients all the time. And one I'm working with right now is an architect, and she has awesome ideas about space. And
I hope so.
Another one of my, she's all right. The architects though. Another one of my clients is not, she doesn't consider herself a creative person, and she's brilliant, but she's not like a super artsy person, but she is inspiring too in her decisiveness, and she has amazing ideas, and I don't think give herself enough credit for that. So again, I think when you get to know someone and you can talk to them, you'll get more from them, and then it's going to be a better end game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, so we're going to wrap things up soon. Diana, would you like to add anything else to all of these enlightening thoughts that you've had thus far? What's that?
Was it super enlightening?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's great to have you here.
You had mentioned you guys were talking about you often do the lighting, and I that lighting right now is super exciting because it feels like it's kind of like, where is the end of art and where is light? Like, where does it all begin? Because there's so many incredibly sculptural lighting fixtures right now.
Yeah.
And it's totally inspiring, and it can kind of create a whole room. The lighting designers right now, like a lot of the showrooms that I frequent, are often cultivating all this new talent, and there's so much lighting, so many lighting designers out there right now who are just, it's like they're these artists, and they happen to light these pieces happen to light up a room. But it's really, that to me is very invigorating, and I think exciting going forward. Like, whether they're hanging from the ceiling or they're coming out of the floor. Recently, I saw this artist who lit up sheetrock wall going up a staircase, and you just saw light coming out of it in little bits. There's tile that is being lit from behind, I saw tile installation, and one corner of it is kind of peeled back with a light coming through. So it's endless. It's endless. And it's very cool right now. I think that's important to note.
Yeah, it didn't feel like that 10 years ago. I'm sorry, Steve.
I was going to say, one funny thing about that reminds me of is that when I work with a lighting consultant or a landscape architect, they look at, let's say, the first concepts that maybe I'll do, and they'll see like lights equidistant and centered in a room, and they'll see the plants and trees like in a line. They're like, okay, architect was here. Now let me move aside. Let me fix this now and make this real. And I would laugh. I think, all right, you're right. You guys take over, because they know the species, they know how it's gonna fill in, and just doing them equidistant, it's gonna look like it's fake and not real, whatever. It's always a joke that they make at my expense. So anyway, I'm sure you do the same if an architect lays out the furniture.
No, I would
like
never do
a
that.
rectangle, and you're like, you're like, thanks, Doug. That's a lot of great ideas.
Right. Hi, I'm leaving too. I think clients are into that too, because it's unique, and I think my clients too. They want things they haven't seen before. They don't want to do what we did with the last client, and I think they're game for that. And same with just the materials in general, steel and wood and marble and tile. There's just so much out there and used in so many different ways, like up the walls and indoor, outdoor. And I think people are game for that right now, because there's so much out there. Tile especially it's just little pieces of art, and you can put them anywhere, whether it's a place that's going to get wet or not. It's so decorative, but multi-purpose too.
So that reminds me, if we're going to be posting this on YouTube, and I hope we will, we should get some
views.
Yeah, we should get some images from you that we can show our viewers as we talk about these things. Because, first of all, it's been great to have you here and not have an architect that we're talking to, because this has been not only enlightening, but it's been very fresh, and it's been lots of fun. So thank you very much, Diana, for being here today.
So much.
Where can people find you? What's your website and your Twitter or whatever else you want to share with us?
My Instagram is Diana Byrne Design, #Diana Byrne Design, and the website, which I need to update, is dbdesigninc.com.
Okay. And that's Byrne, Byrne.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I hope this was helpful.
It will be great. It's been wonderful. It's been really nice to talk.
Fun. I really appreciate getting to do this. It was really fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's going to be, it'll be a great show when it's all put together. So I'll take us out here. You've been watching or listening to Design Your Dream Home with Doug and Steve. We've had Diana Byrne here today. Diana, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And we'll see everybody watching or listening next time.